Harvey Ellington didn't see the woman until she hit the pavement with a sickening thud. He had just picked up his 6-year-old daughter, Violet, from her after-school program and was walking her down the sidewalk toward the bus stop when the blur of a bicycle whipped past them, swerved to avoid a delivery truck, then crashed hard into the curb. The rider flew off and landed a few feet away, unmoving. "Daddy," Violet gasped, clutching his hand tightly. "I see her, baby," Harvey said, already moving. The woman was sprawled on her side, one arm twisted under her. Her helmet had cracked, her knees were scraped raw, and her breathing was shallow. Her hair dark, long, and tangled was stuck to her cheek with sweat. Harvey crouched beside her, gently touching her shoulder. "Ma'am? Hey, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, dazed and unfocused. What happened?" "You crashed." "Pretty bad," Harvey said. "Don't move. You might have hit your head. I'm calling an ambulance." "No," she said quickly, trying to sit up. I can't. I have to." "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly. "You're bleeding, your bike's trashed, and you need to get checked out." "I have a meeting," she mumbled, trying to push herself up. Harvey looked at her like she was insane. "Lady, you're not going to a meeting. You're going to the ER." Violet stood quietly behind him, eyes wide. Harvey turned to her. "Sweetheart, can you grab my jacket from the bench? I'm going to cover her knees." The woman blinked at Violet, confused. "Your daughter?" "Yeah," Harvey said without looking at her. "Single dad. This is kind of our thing after school walks and emergency rescues." Despite the pain, she let out a breathy laugh. The ambulance came 5 minutes later. Harvey insisted on staying until they loaded her in, and when the EMT asked for her name, she barely whispered, "Holland." Harvey stepped forward. "I'll go with her. She shouldn't be alone." "Sir, are you family?" the EMT asked. Holland looked up at him then, eyes glassy but locked on his. "He's my friend." Harvey blinked, then nodded. "Yeah. Friend." Once she was in the ambulance, Harvey turned to Violet, who was sitting patiently on the bench, swinging her legs. "You okay for a little adventure, V?" She nodded, serious. "We're helping her, right?" "Right." Inside the ambulance, Holland drifted in and out. Harvey kept his hand wrapped around hers, offering quiet comfort. She didn't let go. At the hospital, they kept her overnight for a concussion. Harvey gave the front desk his number. He didn't even know her last name, but he couldn't shake the image of her wide, startled eyes. Something about her didn't fit the situation. Her leggings were expensive, her shoes custom-made. Her bike wasn't some grocery store model, it was a carbon fiber road bike worth more than his car. Who the hell was she? 2 days later, she showed up at the community center where Harvey worked part-time fixing HVAC systems and teaching basic carpentry to teenagers. He was elbow-deep in a broken water heater when a shadow fell across his workspace. "Harvey," said a familiar voice. He turned and blinked. Holland. She wore a sleek black blazer over jeans, her arm in a sling. Her hair was pulled back now, clean and glossy, and her eyes were clearer but just as intense. "I tracked you down," she said softly. "Thanks for staying with me." Harvey wiped his hands on a rag. "How'd you find me?" "I bribed the front desk nurse with 3 dozen cupcakes." He laughed. "Smart." She glanced around the room, then back at him. "I owe you. You and your daughter." "You don't. But she'd love to see you again." "Well," she said, stepping closer, "how about dinner? I'd like to thank you both." Harvey hesitated. He didn't have time for whatever this was. Between working 2 jobs, raising Violet, and barely affording rent, he had no room for distractions, especially not ones that looked like her put together, elegant, and way out of his league. But then Violet came running in from the hallway, saw Holland, and lit up like a Christmas tree. "You're okay." "I am," Holland said warmly, kneeling. "Thanks to you and your dad." Violet looked at Harvey. "Can she have dinner with us?" Harvey sighed. "Guess I'm outnumbered." That night, Holland showed up at their apartment with takeout from a place Harvey couldn't even pronounce. She sat cross-legged on the floor with Violet, helping her with a puzzle, laughing at her terrible knock-knock jokes, and asking about her favorite cartoons. Harvey watched from the kitchen, arms crossed, heart pounding for reasons he didn't want to admit. After Violet went to bed, Holland stood beside him, sipping tea. "She's amazing," she said softly. "She is," he said. "She's my everything. I can tell." They stood in silence for a beat, the air thick with something unspoken. "I should go," Holland said, setting her cup down. I'll walk you out, Harvey offered. At the door, she turned to him. You still don't know who I am, do you? He frowned. Should I? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. No, that's actually kind of nice. She left with a soft goodbye, and Harvey closed the door, trying and failing to shake the feeling that he'd just let something important slip through his fingers. The next morning, he found a white envelope on their doormat. Inside was a card with a note in neat handwriting. Thank you for being the kind of man who stops to help. You reminded me what it's like to trust someone. I'd like to see you again. Dinner? My treat this time. Holland Ellington, CEO, Ellington Media Group. Harvey read it 3 times before sitting down hard on the couch. Daddy? Violet asked, rubbing her eyes as she padded into the room. Why do you look weird? He handed her the card. She squinted at it. What's a CEO? Harvey exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. Someone who's about to turn our whole world upside down. You okay, Dad? You're just staring at it. Harvey looked up from the card. Violet was curled beside him on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her like a cape, her head tilted with concern. Yeah, he said, folding the note carefully and setting it on the coffee table. Just wasn't expecting that. She's really rich, huh? Violet asked, her voice hushed like she was afraid someone might overhear. He nodded. Yeah, she runs a company. A big one. Are we still allowed to like her? Violet's brow furrowed in thought, and Harvey reached over to brush a crumb off her cheek. She helped you with your puzzle, didn't she? She got all the edge pieces in a minute. Then I think we're allowed. Later that afternoon, Harvey stood outside a restaurant with a name he couldn't pronounce, dressed in the only button-down shirt in his closet that didn't have a missing button. He'd left Violet with his neighbor, Mrs. Allen, who was thrilled at the chance to babysit a young lady with such excellent manners. Harvey had paced his tiny living room for 10 full minutes before convincing himself not to cancel. Inside, soft jazz played under the clink of silverware and quiet conversation. The place smelled like butter and aged wine. A waiter in a tailored vest led him to a table near a window, where Holland was already waiting, her hair pulled back in a low twist, her blouse crisp and white against her skin. You came, she said, rising to greet him. I brought the shirt that wrinkles the least, Harvey replied, pulling out his own chair. Thought that might count for something. It does, she murmured, smiling as she sat. The waiter brought menus, but Holland didn't open hers. Instead, she studied him, her expression unreadable. I wasn't sure you would agree, she said finally. I wasn't sure either, he admitted. But then my daughter told me I was being weird, so here I am. She laughed, quiet and genuine. Smart girl. She is. She wants to know if you're still good at puzzles. I'm excellent at puzzles, Holland said with mock seriousness. Terrible at chess, though. Harvey leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. You don't seem like someone who's terrible at anything. You'd be surprised, she said, eyes flicking to the window. I'm really good at hiding the mess. He watched her for a moment, sensing the shift in her tone. You don't have to. I know. They ate slowly, the conversation winding through music, books, and childhood stories. Holland mentioned a younger brother who now lived abroad, and how she hadn't seen him in over 2 years. He's always chasing some mountain or diving into rivers. I think he likes the idea of living completely disconnected, she said, pushing her food around with her fork. It's the opposite of me. I've never been able to unplug. That why you were biking through Midtown traffic? Harvey asked. She looked away, her jaw tightening. That day was supposed to be my escape. 1 hour. No phone. No assistant. Just air. You picked a hell of a street for it. I thought I could outrun it. Turns out, a curb outran me. The silence stretched for a breath before Harvey asked, So what do you usually do when you're not getting knocked off bikes? She leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing slightly. You mean what do I do when I'm not being a CEO? Or what do I do when I'm being a person? The second one. I swim, she said after a pause. Every morning at 5. I hate running, I burn toast, and I haven't watched television in years. Not even cartoons. Especially not cartoons. Well, then Violet's going to have to fix that. She already has a list. They lingered at the table long after the plates were cleared. Holland paid before Harvey could even reach for his wallet, and when they stepped outside onto the quiet street, the evening air had cooled. He walked her to her car, a sleek black sedan with a driver waiting discreetly nearby. She stopped beside it, turning to face him. I meant what I wrote, she said. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten. that not everything has to be calculated. I don't really do calculated, Harvey replied. I do duct tape and hope. Maybe that's what I need. He looked at her, really looked, and saw the exhaustion she kept hidden behind practiced poise. The woman who ran boardrooms and negotiated contracts had bruises on her knees and a scar near her temple now. But more than that, she had softness, the kind that came from choosing to show up, even when she didn't have to. I should go, she said softly. I know. She stepped closer, then paused. Do you ever wonder what it would have been like if we'd met under different circumstances? No, he said, his voice low. Because then I wouldn't have seen you like this. And you wouldn't have seen me. She blinked, caught off guard, then opened the car door and slid inside. The next day, Harvey returned to the community center to find something waiting for him in the staff lounge, a sealed envelope with his name on it. Inside was a note and a check. The note read, for the after-school program. No strings. Just give them something better than what I had growing up. The check was for $50,000. Harvey stared at it, frozen. The ink shimmered faintly in the light, and he knew without question whose signature was at the bottom. He folded it carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket. Later, he'd give it to the director. But for now, he just sat down on the bench outside, watching the kids run across the cracked basketball court, wondering what exactly it meant when a woman who could buy anything chose, instead, to give something away. And why the part of him that should have felt intimidated only felt more drawn to her. Why does she want us to come to a museum? Violet asked, kicking her feet under the cafe table. She said there's a new exhibit, Harvey replied, adjusting her scarf. And you've never been to the modern before, so it's something different. She gonna buy the museum? Violet. What? She's rich. Harvey shot her a look, but couldn't help the laugh that escaped. Just eat your sandwich. Outside, the sky was overcast, the kind of gray that settled into your bones. The museum loomed ahead, all clean lines and glass. Harvey had been there once on a high school field trip. The place had felt cold and vast then. Now, it felt like stepping into a different universe one Holland belonged to effortlessly. She met them in the atrium, dressed in a navy coat and black boots that clicked softly on the marble floor. Her expression lit up when she saw Violet, and she knelt immediately. You ready to see some weird art? Holland asked. Is there anything with dinosaurs? No dinosaurs, she said. But there's a room where the walls change color if you walk slow enough. Violet's eyes widened. Let's go. They wandered through the exhibits, Violet darting ahead, Holland trailing behind with Harvey. He kept his hands in his coat pockets, careful not to brush against her by accident. You always this good with kids? He asked quietly. Only the ones who don't ask for ponies, she said, watching Violet twirl in front of a mirrored sculpture. She doesn't ask. She just wants to be near you. Harvey didn't answer right away. Ahead, Violet was reading a placard out loud, stumbling over the artist's name. What about you? He said finally. You ever think about having your own? I used to. Years ago. I thought I had time. You still do. Not the kind that matters. Her voice was calm, but something passed across her face fast, flickering, gone before he could name it. They moved through the gallery slowly, until Holland stopped him in front of a massive canvas covered in deep blue brushstrokes. Violet had wandered to the next room. This painting, she said. It's the only one I ever came here to see. Harvey tilted his head. Why? Because it's unfinished. The artist died before completing it. And they still put it up. Like it deserves to be seen anyway. He studied the raw edges, the faint pencil marks still visible under the paint. You like the imperfections. I like the fact that someone let them stay. Harvey didn't respond, and for a while neither of them said anything. Then Holland turned toward him. Come to the gala next week. He blinked. Gala? It's for the Literacy Foundation. I'm on the board. It's black tie, but we can rent a tux for you. Violet, too, if you're willing to let her stay up past bedtime. He exhaled slowly. Holland, just come. You don't have to give a speech or schmooze or anything. Just stand next to me. You sure that's a good idea? He asked. You've got a reputation to protect. She met his gaze without flinching. That's not the part of my life I'm worried about protecting. He looked away, jaw tight. You don't owe me anything, she said, her voice gentler now. I just want to share a little of my world. He nodded, still unsure, but unable to tell her no. The night of the gala, Harvey stood in front of the mirror, tugging at the cuffs of the tux Holland's assistant had delivered 2 days earlier. Violet was behind him, spinning in a navy dress with silver shoes. She looked like she belonged in a storybook. You look like a waiter, she announced. Thanks. I mean a fancy one. That helps. Mrs. Allen arrived to watch Violet, and Harvey caught the subway uptown. The gala was held at the Ellington Foundation Hall, a building he'd walked past 100 times but never entered. Inside, the ceiling soared, crystal chandeliers casting light across polished floors and champagne trays that floated by in the hands of silent staff. Holland stood near the marble staircase, speaking with a group of trustees. The moment she saw him, her expression changed, not surprised, not smug, just quietly pleased. She excused herself and walked toward him. You clean up well, she said, eyes sweeping over him. And you look like royalty. She wore a dark silver gown, structured but fluid, like it had been made for movement. Diamonds glittered at her ears, subtle but undeniable. Come on, she said. Let me introduce you to someone. The next hour passed in a blur of names and polite nods. Harvey kept his answers short, his posture guarded. He could feel the glances, curious, calculating, but Holland never left his side. She threaded her arm through his without hesitation, laughed at his dry comments, and ignored every raised brow. At one point, as the string quartet played something soft and elegant, she leaned close. You're doing fine. Pretty sure I just insulted that guy's tie. He needed to be insulted. Why do you keep pulling me into your world? He asked, not unkindly. What are you looking for? Her smile faded. Something real. Later, after the auction and speeches, the crowd began to thin. Holland led him to the rooftop terrace, where the city stretched out in glittering silence. This is what I miss, she said. Quiet. Space to breathe. He looked at her, the skyline behind her like a painting. You ever think about leaving it? He asked. Every day, she said. But I built too much. What if it's costing you more than it's worth? I don't know how to stop. Harvey stepped closer, not touching her, just close enough to feel the warmth between them. I don't have money, or a penthouse, or a last name that opens doors. But I can teach my daughter to use a power drill. I can fix a busted pipe. And I can tell when someone's trying to hold everything together with nothing but willpower. I'm not looking for someone to save me. I know. But you don't have to keep standing alone either. She stared at him, something unraveling in her eyes. Then she reached for his hand, slowly, like she was afraid it might disappear. He didn't pull away. Not this time. Below them, the lights of the city blinked on and off like stars unsure whether to rise or fall. Harvey stood in the doorway of the Ellington Media headquarters, feeling like he'd stepped onto the set of a movie he hadn't auditioned for. The building stretched upward in sleek steel and glass, its lobby buzzing with people who moved like they had somewhere more important to be. The receptionist offered him a polite smile, but didn't ask who he was. She already knew. Holland had sent a car, and apparently, his name had been added to the security list 2 hours before he arrived. He adjusted the collar of his jacket, still faintly damp from the sudden spring rain, and followed the assistant who appeared with an iPad and a practiced welcome. They took the elevator to the 32nd floor, where the air smelled faintly of espresso and lemon polish. The assistant gestured toward a set of glass doors with Holland's name etched in silver. She's waiting for you, the assistant said, then vanished down the corridor. Harvey stepped inside. The office was large but not ostentatious. A wall of windows looked out over the skyline, and in the center of it all, Holland was seated at a desk that seemed too modern to be comfortable. She stood when she saw him, her blazer draped over her chair, sleeves rolled up, a pin tucked behind one ear. You came, she said. You sent a driver, he replied, crossing the room. Not exactly subtle. Neither are you. Her gaze softened. I needed to see you. He didn't sit. What's going on? I'm leaving, she said. His jaw tightened. Leaving the company? Yes. For how long? Permanently. He blinked. You're walking away from all of this? She nodded, stepping around the desk. It's been coming for a while. The accident forced me to stop long enough to realize I built something I no longer want to live inside. Harvey exhaled slowly, trying to read the expression on her face. So what happens now? I'm handing over my shares to the board. They'll keep the company running. I've already appointed a successor. It's done. And you decided this when? A week ago. But I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. Harvey folded his arms. Why tell me now? Because I want to know what it looks like to build something real with someone who doesn't care about polished floors or last names on buildings. I've spent years constructing a world that impresses everyone but fulfills no one. You opened the door. I'm choosing to walk through it. He stared at her, the weight of her words settling somewhere deep in his chest. "You said you weren't looking to be saved," he said. "I'm not," she replied. "But I'm done pretending I don't want to be known." He reached out, brushing his fingers against hers. "So what do you want?" She looked down at their hands, then back up. "I want to take Violet to the aquarium. I want to learn how to make pancakes that don't turn into charcoal. I want to go to sleep without checking my email at midnight. And I want someone who'll tell me when I'm being impossible and still show up the next day." "I do all of those things," Harvey said. "Except the pancakes. Mine are worse." She laughed, the sound lighter than he'd ever heard it. "Then we'll burn them together." That night, they stood in Harvey's kitchen. Violet sat on the counter, swinging her legs as she watched Holland wrestle with a mixing bowl. "You're getting flour everywhere," Violet observed. "That's part of the charm," Holland replied, dusting her arm with a dab of batter. Harvey leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You're not going to win her over with sugar alone." "I'm not trying to win," Holland said. "I'm just trying to be here." Later, after Violet had fallen asleep on the couch with a book open on her chest, Holland stepped out onto the fire escape. Harvey followed, handing her a cup of tea. The city stretched around them, quieter now, rain slicking the streets below. "I spoke to my lawyer," Holland said. "I'm buying a house. Not far from here." He raised an eyebrow. "A whole house?" "It's small. Old porch. Needs some work. Thought you might know someone who's good with a wrench." He looked at her sideways. "You plan on staying?" "I'm not going back to the penthouse. I want something with creaky floors and mismatched cabinets. I want to hear the neighbors arguing on Sunday mornings." He sipped his tea. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." They stood in silence for a long moment, the city breathing around them. "I don't know what this looks like," Harvey said finally. "I've never done this. Not with someone like you." "There is no someone like me," she said, bumping her shoulder against his. "Exactly." She turned to face him, her voice quiet. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to stay. So do you?" "I will." He kissed her, then not the kind of kiss born from shock or timing or adrenaline. It was steady, certain, the kind of kiss that said, "I see you. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Months later, the house on the corner of Maple and 3rd had a new mailbox with both their names on it. The porch still creaked, the cabinets still didn't match, and the kitchen smelled like burnt toast more often than not. Violet had her own room with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, and every Sunday, the three of them walked to the corner bakery for pastries and chocolate milk. Holland took a part-time role at a local nonprofit, teaching financial literacy to women starting over. Harvey kept fixing things with his hands and building trust with kids who'd never had anyone stay. And when spring came again, they planted a small garden in the backyard. It didn't grow perfectly, but it grew, just like them, together. Harvey stood in the doorway of the half-painted living room, a paint roller in one hand and a puzzled frown on his face. "You bought a chandelier?" Holland, barefoot on the paint-splattered tarp, glanced up from the box she was prying open. "It's not a chandelier. It's a hand-blown glass pendant fixture with sustainable brass accents." He stared at her. "You bought a chandelier." She grinned and pulled out a delicately wrapped light fixture, its swirled glass catching the sunlight streaming through the bare window. "You said I could pick the lighting." "I said that in the context of choosing between light bulbs, not art installations." "You also said you wanted the living room to feel more open," she said innocently, unrolling the cord. "This will lift the ceiling visually. It's 10 feet tall. It might lift the roof, too." From behind them, Violet's voice echoed through the hall. "Is it going in my room?" "Please say it's going in my room." "No, sweetheart," Holland called back. "This one's for the grown-ups." "Good," Violet said, skipping into the kitchen. "I want glow-in-the-dark planets in mine." Harvey leaned against the frame, watching Holland untangle the fixture's delicate wiring. "You know you don't have to prove anything." She didn't look up. "I'm not proving. I'm creating." He tilted his head. "For us. For me. And for what we're building." That night, after Violet had gone to sleep with her galaxy of glowing stars overhead, Harvey found Holland on the back porch. She had her knees pulled up to her chest, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. A cup of chamomile tea steamed quietly on the table beside her. He sat next to her without a word, the porch creaking beneath them. She leaned into his side without hesitation. "I met with my father today," she said softly. Harvey looked down at her. "Everything okay?" He wanted to know how long this phase is going to last. He didn't respond immediately. "And what did you say?" "I told him this isn't a phase. It's a life." One I chose. One I'm not giving up. Harvey reached over and took her hand. He doesn't get to decide what happiness looks like for you. No. But for a long time, I thought he did. She fell quiet, watching the wind stir the trees at the edge of the yard. I used to think success was the only thing that could keep me safe, she whispered. That if I was impressive enough, powerful enough, no one could hurt me. And now I know safety is falling asleep next to someone who doesn't need me to be anything but here. He kissed her temple, slow and deliberate. I'm not going anywhere. I know, she said. That's what makes it real. 2 weeks later, the garden bloomed for the first time. It wasn't perfect. One row of carrots came up crooked, and the tomatoes seemed confused about whether they wanted to survive, but it was alive. Violet had named each of the sunflowers after her favorite book characters, and Holland had taken to watering them barefoot in the mornings before work. The house no longer echoed. It breathed. It held. On a quiet Saturday, Harvey stood in the middle of their kitchen, flour dusting his hands and a mixing bowl wobbling dangerously on the counter. You're doing it wrong, Violet announced from her stool. I'm doing it differently. You're burning it. I'm creating texture. Holland walked in just in time to see Violet blow on the smoke detector with a paper fan. What are we making? Pancakes, Harvey said. Technically. Don't want to know what's in them? No, Violet and Harvey said in unison. Holland laughed and kissed Harvey's cheek, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. I'll make real breakfast. No faith, he muttered, flipping a dubious-looking pancake with exaggerated care. Later that afternoon, the three of them sat in the backyard, their legs stretched out on mismatched lawn chairs. The sun was warm but not overbearing, and the air smelled faintly of cut grass and lavender from the planter boxes Holland had insisted on installing. I talked to the nonprofit director this morning, she said, sipping lemonade. They want to start a mentorship program, pairing women with hands-on skilled trainers. Harvey looked over. Like carpentry? Like everything. Budgeting, repair work, resume building. You'd be perfect. I'm not exactly boardroom material. That's the point. They don't want suits. They want people who show up and stay. I could do that, he said, considering. But only if you stop calling light fixtures sculptural metaphors. No promises. Violet reached over and tugged on Holland's hand. Are you staying with us forever? Holland turned to her. I soft. If you'll let me. Then yes, Violet said decisively. But only if I get to name the new kitten. Harvey nearly choked. Kitten. You said we could talk about it after the house was done, Violet said smugly. Holland raised an eyebrow. She's got you there. The following weekend, they returned from the shelter with a gray fluff ball named Captain Pickles, who promptly fell asleep in a saucepan and claimed the kitchen as his kingdom. On the first anniversary of the day Harvey found Holland crumpled on the sidewalk, they stood under the newly hung pendant light in their living room, surrounded by family and friends. Violet wore a white dress with little daisies stitched into the hem. Captain Pickles stalked between guests, unimpressed by the noise. Holland wore a simple dress and no diamonds. Her bouquet was wrapped in a ribbon Violet had chosen. Harvey's suit still didn't quite fit right, but he didn't care. As the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the applause echoed through the room. Holland leaned in, resting her forehead against Harvey's. You still think I'm out of your league? She whispered. I thank God every day that a delivery truck made you crash. She laughed, eyes shining. You always did have terrible timing. And you fixed mine. They danced in the living room under the flickering chandelier she refused to call a chandelier. Violet cut the cake with more enthusiasm than precision. The garden twinkled with fairy lights, and neighbors wandered in with folding chairs and casseroles. There was no press. No headlines. Just music, fireflies, and the sound of Captain Pickles knocking over a vase in the hallway. And when the night settled into quiet and Violet was tucked into bed, Harvey and Holland stood together in the doorway of their bedroom, hands clasped, the house humming softly around them. It wasn't the world she'd built. It was the one they'd chosen. And that made all the difference.